Okay, well, today I wanted to review a book that I just finished reading, I think on Sunday. No, that was not Sunday. Well, I finished reading it a couple days ago. It is called Snapped. It's by C.M. Sutter, Sutter. I gave this book 2 stars. It was free. I read it on my phone for free. Um, the plot is pretty cool. It's part of a series. Um, it's about this woman whose father was a member of law enforcement, and he was killed by a serial killer. He was murdered in cold blood. So now this woman who has become, who was a, who became a detective at the same sheriff's department where her father worked, she's decided she wants to avenge her father's death and find the serial killer because he's still out there somewhere who killed her father. But in order to do that, she has to become an FBI agent. So that's what she did. She trained at Quantico and went from becoming a detective to an FBI agent. So this book, Snapped, it takes us into her first case right off of Quantico, where she is helping a team of fellow FBI agents catch a serial killer. So it sounds like an exciting plot, and I have to say, I was very impressed with the plot. Um, I really did enjoy the story aspect of the book because I like thrillers and stuff like that. Very cool. But there were some pretty major flaws in the book that I'm glad I read because they will help me as a writer not to do the same thing. Um, One of the main flaws was that the book had far too much detail. Now, at first, it was a nice thing. It started off pretty cool because it's sort of like when you're watching a movie, and Zack Snyder does this a lot, where there are a lot of these beautiful cinematic close-ups. You'll see a close-up of someone's hand on a door. You'll see a close-up of maybe their eyes as they're walking into a room. It's just a series of these gorgeous close-ups. And it's nice because it builds your anticipation for what's going to happen next. It puts you in the scene. But if the entire movie is just close-up after close-up after close-up and you never get a wide shot, it's overwhelming. It's like, I don't know what's going on. The director needs to bring you back a notch so you can get a full-fledged view, the full scope of what's going on. And that is what happened in this book. I'll give you an example of what I mean. Chapter 1 was cool. It started off with a bunch of close-ups. Like, for example, this. She sat in the driver's seat of her dark blue Accord and drummed the steering wheel with her well-manicured nails. Nervousness had set in and made her squirm with anticipation. But she was excited nonetheless. 6 months to the day had gone by, and blah, 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 blah. I won't finish reading all that. Okay, so, you see her tapping her hand, her well-manicured nails on the steering wheel. And it goes on a little bit more that I won't read, with a few more details about this suspect's appearance and every little thing that she does. That was cool. But then the every little thing that she does kept going throughout the book. Like, we never get a wide shot. It's just a series of close-ups. For example, on page 3 of the book, listen to this. We're still with the same suspect. She parked the car alongside the garage and killed the engine, then rounded her vehicle, pulled the brass-colored key out of her pocket, and turned it in the lock. With the door latch in her right hand, she clicked the roller door and clicked on the light. Inside sat a white cargo van. She opened its double back doors and stepped in. Everything she needed had been loaded in the back a week prior, but double-checking wouldn't hurt. With a smile of satisfaction, Jordan slammed the doors, climbed inside, and backed out. She pulled her car to fill the vacated space, then lowered the garage door, locked it, and gave the handle a strong tug to make sure it was secure. She looked forward to the cover of darkness. You see all that? She put the car in park. She backed up. She looked in the mirror. You don't have to, when you're writing, you don't need that many close-ups. All you had to do was say, she got in the car and she pulled out, or she got into the van and she pulled out of the garage. Then move on to the next scene. This is way too much. And the whole book was like that. Every little thing, she turned this way. She looked up. She blinked. She took a deep breath. She let it out. Like, stop. It's too much. The next thing that was wrong was the main character. And this kind of like hurt my heart because the plot was so good and it had so much potential, but the main character fell completely flat. And it was because she had no personality whatsoever. It's like she was on what's like I forget what you call, not, is it an upper? The drugs that you take when you're super depressed, when you're really sad, you just need something. I can't think of an example right now, but it's like she was on like Zoloft. That's it, Zoloft throughout the whole book, except it was the kind of Zoloft, I guess, or where she couldn't process bad things. Everything was, okay, this is great. This is great. La 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 la, nothing bothers me. I have no issues. Oh, it's so pretty. Oh, my new FBI partner. He's handsome. Okay, moving on. Oh, look, a rock. It's like nothing was going on up here. So she had no flaws. She had a bunch of supposedly good qualities, but those good qualities were just very stale. Like, she was supposed to be a good conversationalist, but she wasn't really. She just talked about like the weather. She was supposed to be a good FBI agent as well, but I noticed honestly that the things she was praised for in the book were just common sense. So it wasn't that she had exceptional skill. Like, I learned nothing from this book about what a good FBI agent would do. When I watched the show Alias, that was one of my favorite shows, I learned a lot about what a good spy would be like. This book taught me nothing about what a good FBI agent would be like. And also, she had no romantic or sexual interest in anyone or anything. And I'm not saying that romance needs to be a part of a book. It doesn't. In fact, I love books that don't have, huge romantic scenes because that gets cheesy. But human beings are sexual creatures, unless there is a specific reason why. Unless someone has decided, I am not going to pursue that aspect of my life right now. That's interesting too. Put that in the book, because humans are sexual creatures. So now she would acknowledge in the book, okay, my partner's really handsome. But then she'd be like, okay, now moving on to the next subject. No, that's not how women work. That's not how anybody works. If you see someone hot and you are attracted to them, you're going to think about that for a little bit. And because we're reading a book about a person's inside thoughts, we want to know what they're thinking. So sexual interest and romantic interest have to be included in a book. That's what makes a character whole and full. It was just, she had nothing going on up here. It was just blankness. Thirdly, this is the third thing, the conversations in the book were simply there to serve as info dumps. None of them were realistic. It was just a bunch of characters sitting around unnaturally speaking to each other about things that had happened in the past, or giving a bunch of information that was completely unnecessary. It was a cheat. Instead of weaving in background information about characters, it was just using conversations as an opportunity to force the reader to know something about each character's background. That's not fun to read. It came across honestly as like, I felt like I was reading or watching, I don't know, I guess you'd say reading, conversations between 12-year-olds who are on their best behavior and pretending to be like adults. It did not feel realistic at all. So that completely took me out of the story. And most of the time I was sitting there reading, like, what is this? This is not good. So that was really bad. And the last negative aspect of the book was that the law enforcement made completely unrealistic moves. So this goes back to the fault of the writer, unfortunately. They did not do their research when it comes to the way law enforcement handles cases. And I can say that as someone who works in the news industry and has to work closely with law enforcement. For example, there were a couple of things. In the story, at one point, the FBI had already searched a suspect's home. They searched it from top to bottom. A couple of days later, or maybe it was just hours later, it could have been hours later, the FBI needs to track down that suspect's husband who lives in this house that they just searched. But the FBI agents sit around discussing the fact that we don't know where the husband works. We can't figure it out. And I'm thinking, y'all just searched the house and you don't know where the husband works? So they spent like a day, a whole 24 hours. No, it was more. It was like 2 days not knowing where the husband works, being completely unable to track him down. You know, you can also just Google someone these days and find out where they work. It was ridiculous. Another terrible thing was, another part of the story was when the FBI had gotten surveillance video of a white van. And they knew that a suspect was driving this white van. So they're like, okay, we got this surveillance video. We watched it. Now we're not going to make a copy of this video or take any pictures of it. We're just going to leave it, send it right back to the company that gave it to us, ignore it. But we want that white van. Okay? Because that's how the FBI works. They don't make copies of videos like that. And then when someone calls in and they say, hey, the white van that you guys are searching for in this particular part of Houston, Texas, I see it in this particular part of Houston, Texas. Like the hubcaps of the van are missing. So the FBI responds by saying, oh, but we don't know if that surveillance video showed that the van's hubcaps were missing. So that might not be the right, we don't know. We better go back to that surveillance video that we never made a copy of and comb through it and find out if the van had missing hubcaps. So while they're doing all this combing through, well, first they have to track down the people who made the surveillance video because the FBI never made a copy of it for themselves. And this whole time, they never send a plainclothes officer out there to watch the street to see if the van will come back. They never do that. But they spend hours and hours and hours trying to track down surveillance video instead of taking care of the problem. That is not how law enforcement works. And even if someone didn't work with law enforcement, they would know that because it's just not common sense. I'm sorry, this book had me worked up because it had so much potential, but because the writer didn't do enough research about the way the FBI functions, the way any law enforcement agency would function, it really fell flat. And as I was reading other reviews on Amazon about the book, other people noticed the exact same thing. So this is not just me. It's something a lot of readers noticed. So yeah, it was unfortunate. That's why I only could give this book 2 stars, because it had a great plot, super fabulous idea for a book. But because the main character did not have a full-fledged personality, the conversations in the book were just info dumps and completely unrealistic. And the writer did not do their research about how law enforcement carries out their procedures. It fell really flat. And I will say, as a writer, I'm guilty of not doing research too, because I'm lazy. And I don't always feel like I have a lot of ideas for a story, but if it's a story that's going to involve a lot of research, honestly, I'll be like, nope, let somebody else write that because I don't feel like, shadowing somebody who does that job for a day and I don't want to. So that's why I often choose to write science fiction and fantasy because I can make up all the rules myself and also watch some episodes of Star Trek and learn from that. Yeah. Okay, well, this was like a huge rant today. And I don't mean to be like mean about the book because it still had some good stuff. Like I read the whole thing through because I liked the plot. Um, and I think that the writer is a good writer. It's just, the book needed some tightening up and maybe a little bit more time. And if you ever read my stuff, like my books are a hot mess. I'm going to be honest. I'm not the greatest writer in the world. So, in fact, most of us aren't like, none of us are perfect. So it's okay. It's just, this book did make me a little bit upset in that it had some flaws. But that's all. I'm going to stop talking because I'm talking too much. All right. Thanks for watching. Bye.